Tom Frank, and if you've ever read any geek post on any message board anywhere, you understand why we call this opinion piece. But let's face it, there's a very specific point in our lives when we become the most nostalgic for our childhood. And that is when we finish our education and join the workforce. That's when we have the greatest opportunity and the greatest inclination to say, hey, remember when? As our lives move on, our ability to aggressively reminisce about the past diminishes since we have to do things like raise kids. But that, in and of itself, doesn't cause nostalgia to die out since a new group of people take over and care about the things that were important to them when they were young. But let's face it, something has changed and we are stuck in a time loop where we can't stop caring about the 1980s. Nostalgia for the 90s should have kicked in by now, but it really hasn't. It's like the DeLorean is stuck on 1985 and the control panel won't budge. Yeah, there's 90s nostalgia. I remember things like The Real World, Studs, The Dancing Baby on Ally McBeal. But it's not really a thing. 60s nostalgia beats it, 70s nostalgia beats it, and 80s nostalgia beats it to a bloody pulp like the first Clubber Lang fight. 90s nostalgia is like the fading photo of Marty McFly's family. It's sort of there, but not really. And I think the reason that 90s nostalgia is so weak is not because it isn't the time for it to kick in. It is. But because in the middle of the 90s, the internet took over everything. And the internet is anti-nostalgic. The internet cares about now. There's no reruns of Twitter. No morning DJ says, the year was 2001. A young all-your-base meme made us laugh. The emphasis is on what's trending this second. Of course you can find exhaustive shrines on ColecoVision games, very active Facebook groups about vintage, large-size Star Wars action figures, or a detailed history chronicling all of the minutiae of the Pinky Tuscadero episodes of Happy Days. In short, the internet is wonderful at being nostalgic about things that predate the internet. I mean, 90s nostalgia is weak, but after 2000, once the internet was firmly in place and planted cables on the backs of all of our necks and sucked us into the matrix, nostalgia seems to have ended. We used to refer things that were popular right now as water cooler topics, things that coworkers would talk about while standing next to each other at the water cooler. That is dead. We still have water coolers and we still have coworkers, but we can't strike up conversations because with the internet, pop culture has become way more fragmented, way more customized. Just like David S. Pumpkins, we're all doing our own thing. Back in the day, it was easy to have a conversation guessing who shot JR. But now, chatting about the manga scanslations of Mao Dante you've been reading, I just don't see that happening. Plus, the internet has made us more boring than when we would actually do things. You can't say, hey, wasn't it great when we used to stare at the monitors on our desktop computers all day instead of staring at the monitors on our smartphones? Weren't things much simpler and ironically cooler back then? I mean, you can't reboot the Wonder Years and set everything in 2008. Kevin sitting in front of his computer for the whole episode. And then everything changed between me and Winnie when she finally put me as a top friend on MySpace. Moreover, modern technology can seriously hurt drama, and that's another reason why we're seeing more and more stories set in the past. On the surface, the live-action reboot of Pete's Dragon didn't need to take place in the 80s, but if at the end of the movie, everyone who saw the dragon could take out their smartphones and post it on their Instagram account, the whole movie falls apart. Nostalgia isn't dead. Stranger Things, Paper Girls, and Ready Player One are hugely popular, even with people who are too young to know what Dig Dug and Tomb of Horrors are. And that's strange. As time marches on, it's almost as if we are nostalgic for being nostalgic. More and more people are becoming like Parzival in Ready Player One. I have no idea how our relationship with nostalgia is going to go from here, but let's face it, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea for James Halliday to get cracking on the Oasis.